Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, we have a very special occasion today. We are hosting Ambassador of the United States of America, Mr. Lee Feinstein. Please.
Pani Dyrektorze, thank you very much, and thank you for acknowledging everyone so that I don't have to worry about missing any of the distinguished guests. But thank you all for being here. I will say one word about my good friend Maciej Witucki, not just because he may be the only CEO here, although for all of you students, I would encourage you to buttonhole him before you leave. But also because he gave me a very timely and intensive course in Koszminski University, inviting me to a dinner which Director Koszminski was specifically not invited to, which was a discussion of people who were traveling to Koszminski University for the purposes of accrediting the university, extending or re-upping its accreditation. And, you know, I'm sworn to secrecy about what they really said, Pani Dyrektorze. But I'll at least say the positive thing since I'm a diplomat and I'm supposed to focus on the positive. But they have been very impressed with your determination and vision to establish a private business university here in Warsaw. And to do it successfully, and to take some out-of-the-box decisions that nobody expected would necessarily work, one of which we talked about just before coming here, which was to build your university across the river, which, when you did it, was quite a leap of faith, but which has panned out for a variety of reasons. So, and they're also very complimentary of the people in this room, not by name, but by what they know about the student body here at Koszminski. We very much, Pani Dyrektorze, that your accreditation will come through.
Thank you very much. Let's keep our fingers crossed.
And thank you very much, Pani Dyrektorze, for your comments about the history of the American Studies Center. And the American Studies Center remains a very close friend of the embassy and a very important source of learning and knowledge about the United States. And we appreciate very much the work you do, whatever small contributions we might have made back in the day to helping you get on your feet. You have repaid many times. Thank you very much. Dzień dobry, miło mi, że mogę spotkać się ze studentami z Akademii Leona Koszmińskiego i Ośrodka Studiów Amerykańskich Uniwersytetu Warszawskiego. Dziękuję, że nie poszliście do domu. I'm going to talk a little bit about transatlantic relations today, and it's fitting that I do it here with these two institutions who, as we've heard, embody the very close bonds of the Polish-American relationship. As I said before, Koszminski University was founded by someone who taught at American universities and was the recipient of a Fulbright scholarship. And Professor Grzegorz Kolodko, also a Fulbright scholar and former finance minister of Poland, is another great example. And we have some Koszminski graduates at the American Embassy, Mariola Bernacka and Agata Piotrowska, both at the U.S. Embassy. So thank you not only for what you do, but for giving me some of my best employees. And the same is true for the American Studies Center. And we are fortunate also, Director Bashuk is another Fulbrighter. Professor David Jones teaches at the center. So I'm beginning with the premise that transatlantic relations have never been more important. And that's why this is an important place and the right place to give this lecture. I'll talk about how the United States views the relationship with Europe and how U.S.-Polish relations fit into that framework. I'll just say that on a bilateral note that our two governments have accomplished a lot in the last 2 years, and President Obama's trip to Warsaw at the end of next month is a good opportunity for us to take stock of all that we've accomplished and also to set an agenda for the future. This is an important sign of the importance that the President attaches to Europe and also to U.S.-Polish relations. This will be President Obama's 8th trip to Europe.
My name is Stepan. I'm on PhD program, and I have, of course, many questions. Yes, one thing I wanted to say that absolutely what Professor Koźmiński mentioned and you, it's true. So there is really a strong DNA relation between Polish and American people, especially countries, and the US helped us many times in the past. We would like to have much stronger help, but I hope so. It's not my job to talk about this. But one thing, you mentioned Africa and social media. So especially US, you have CAI, all this stuff, you know, investigating everything. And no one knew anything about this, what was going on there, or what was preparing to, or perhaps that was not prepared, but it has happened. So I have the impression that we absolutely know or knew nothing about this situation there. And there are many other similar topics. So obviously we listen to people they don't know or they are not well informed. Or what is the reason for this? Because the situation is changing in the world nowadays. So what would be your advice, or perhaps you know exactly what's the answer, is just to be better in the future, because this is only an example. Something like this could happen somewhere else.
Well, it's an excellent question, and it's a fair question. And by the way, I endorse the first part of your statement as well. We all want more cooperation, and I appreciate that. And I consider this a happy person's problem to have, because it's not everywhere in the world where an American ambassador can work, and the main complaint is we want more. So it means a lot to be here. On the question of the ability to predict, the same was said, and also accurately, about 1989. That is that our intelligence agencies and others were unable to predict at the time what was about to happen. And I used to joke, I would love to have seen a list of doctoral dissertation topics that were canceled after November 9th, 1989. I'm sure the list was long. So I think that to be fair, no one can predict when something like this will happen. What people can do is they can identify factors that create vulnerabilities or the environment in which this kind of change can take place. So I can't honestly fault anybody for being taken by surprise about what happened. It's no surprise to anybody that these were societies where there was very small space for civil society, where there were autocratic rulers, where there were demographic issues that created instability, and that in a networked age, there would be stirrings of democracy at one time or another. So, you know, in my own work on genocide prevention, what we have found is that you can identify the factors, but you can't precisely pinpoint when something is going to happen. And I'm not sure anybody can actually do that. On the question of social networks and how they impact things, it is quite different. And if you look at, say, the Central European models and what happened, and what's happening in North Africa and the Middle East, there are some very significant differences. And one of which is the rapidity with which these movements can be organized. And this is a good thing in the sense that it helps mobilize people who want a greater voice in their government, but it also creates unique challenges as well, including how these newly mobilized forces can organize sufficiently well to take over the reins of governing. It's in Poland, the circumstance was quite different. Unfortunately, there was a long time between the first strikes and the first democratic election. This was unfortunate. But if there was a silver lining there, the silver lining was that there was an opportunity for people to prepare for the transition, and maybe ironically or paradoxically, it did contribute in some way to the incredible good fortune that Poland had at the right place and at the right time, such skillful people who could make such bold decisions and actions when they were needed.
Krzysztof Zagórski from Kosmiński University. I would like to refer, Mr. Ambassador, to a few final remarks from your speech. One of my few hobbies is carpentry. So I know that in order to make a piece of furniture stable, it's better to put it on 4 legs rather than 3. You have mentioned 3. So you did not name the first one, so you spoke about it. The fourth one would be the interpersonal relations, exchange of any kind between people, between NGOs, between cultural institutions. The fact that if I am bored, I can take my car and go to Berlin and meet my friends and have some beer and go to Pergamon Museum can't be overestimated. It is much more difficult to do it with my American colleagues. It's distance, but it's not only the distance. It's also some of these hurdles which you know about. So let me simply ask you 2 questions. Well, I am very grateful for your attempt to increase the number of visas. It means that probably it's a policy to make it more easy for us to get it. But also perhaps there is some program of facilitating these personal relations, these personal contacts, without which the understanding between the nations are impossible. So you spoke about close personal contacts between government officials. They are very important, but much more important are contacts between people.
I thought I gave ample attention to this issue. In fact, I concluded on this point and gave a number of examples. But let me just try to add a little bit to what I said. First of all, I think that people-to-people contacts are absolutely essential, and we are pursuing a number of different programs to expand contacts and exchanges, both Poles and Americans. One of them is the fact that we've doubled the size of the Fulbright program. Another is that we are creating opportunities for students, such as students at Kosmiński University, to spend summers in the United States at a range of different American businesses at a formative age. And we like this program a lot because it speaks to an important growth area for our relationship. And also, frankly, it's clever in terms of it's less expensive than funding a full scholarship for people through the Kosmiński through the Fulbright program. We might call it the Kosmiński program. And we also are looking at ways to use some EU funds to encourage Poles to study in the United States. And there is an Atlantis program, which is sort of akin to the Erasmus program, which creates an opportunity. I do have to say that Poles, frankly, have not taken full advantage of this. And I guess what I would say is, and of course we're talking about social networking and things like that, and last year 140,000 Poles traveled to the United States, and of course there are 10 million Americans of Polish descent in the United States. So I see this as extremely important and really, all due respect, something for both of us to consider, because we really need to look, together about how we can expand and maximize the very, very rich ties that we have between us. And that's why when I talk about the relationship, I talk about, of course, our great history, but also about how our relationship needs to be tailored to now, to the present century, and not just rely on on past ties. And by the way, the fact that you can go to see beautiful museums in Germany in a car from Poland, this is a good thing. We are delighted that this is the case. We fought very, very hard, and we're very honored to play a supporting role in Poland's transformation to become integrated into European institutions like NATO and the EU. So the fact that Poland has a strong affinity with the EU, we don't see this as somehow detracting. We see this as additive. We see this as a very, very positive thing in the relationship. And one of the things I would like to get across is because Poles and Americans tend to see things not always the same, but through a similar strategic lens, and because of our own histories and what we have in common, the fact that Poland has growing influence and affinity with the EU, this is a great thing for us. And while in these settings, I usually talk about the continuity in relations in foreign policy between Democrats and Republicans, and it is true. It is absolutely true. And actually, one of my books that the director was kind enough to refer to, I co-wrote with somebody who worked for John McCain's campaign, a Republican, a very politically mobilized Republican. And John McCain was one of the endorsers of my book. Another one was Madeleine Albright, and the third was Angelina Jolie. But we can talk about that later. But if there's one, main discontinuity with respect to transatlantic relations, it's this. There used to be a debate in the United States about whether a strong EU was good for the United States. That debate is over. Our complaint with the EU is it's not strong enough. So we would like to see the EU be stronger. We think America will be stronger with a stronger EU, and we think a strong Poland, a Poland that strongly identifies with the EU, is good for Polish-American relations too.
So my name is Justina, and I'm in the BBA program. I'd actually like to take this opportunity for the students of Koźmiński to give you a round of applause and thank you for coming to us today and having one of these sessions. So, yay! All the students sat in the back. So I have a bit of a two-point question. The questions have nothing to do with each other. The first one is that we are business students, and you were talking about trade relations. So is there any maybe pointers or advice you could give us on which ones the United States is focused on, maybe specifically which trade we should be getting into when it comes to the United States in investing in Poland? And the second one, I was just wondering, because I am from Canada, and I led a movement there in regards to Darfur, and I was very, very excited to hear that you wrote a book about it, which I will be Googling and reading right away. Ordering from Amazon legally. But
I don't get any royalties anyway. So.
Oh, okay. So I was just wondering if you're still involved in that and just your opinion about that as well.
It's not part of my job description presently as the ambassador to Poland, but I am, of course, very interested in the general subject. And that piece was as much about this broader idea of what the international community's responsibility is in similar situations as it was specifically about Darfur. So I think that there are some, applicable lessons, but of course I wrote that as a private citizen, so whatever I said has absolutely no standing now. And in terms of, growth areas and investments, I haven't yet been a private sector guy, so I wouldn't necessarily take advice from me in this, but I'll try to give you kind of informally a sense of what I see coming through my office in terms of American business people coming in. What I see is hedge funds and investors suddenly showing greater interest in Poland. I think that's partly because of Poland's relative economic dynamism compared to other parts of Europe. I see companies coming to Poland because of its location. 10 years ago, location was a negative for Poland, just as being across the river was a negative for Koźmiński University maybe at the onset. But now it's seen as a positive in the center of Europe, in the EU, with access east, and in a much more stable environment than investing in the emerging markets to the east, but also with the ability to support companies doing business and manufacturing to the West, and in particular Germany. So another area that I see of great interest is companies that are investing in manufacturing infrastructure in Poland that support, for example, the German car industry and their exports to China. I see a lot of interest in high tech, and the way I would describe that is there is some business service center interest, and that is interesting because what people tell me anecdotally is that when they do their cost-benefit analyses, of course, the workforce here is highly skilled, but also surprisingly that the cost of doing business can be lower in Poland than it might be in a place in, say, South Asia. And this is quite interesting and surprising. But equally, I see a lot of higher up-the-chain investments in R&D from some of the major American companies. And without, privileging any one or the other, it's safe to say, for example, that Google has interesting operations in both Kraków and Wrocław, and IBM has major investments in Wrocław and elsewhere. GE is a very, very big investor in high technology. I was recently at the Aviation Institute to see what they were doing, and they are hiring a large number of PhD and MA engineers to work on various a range of different projects. So I see investments. I see finance. I see financial interests coming here. I see manufacturing to support the industry in Germany, and I also see as well interest in high tech, both in the support side as well as higher up the research chain.
My name is Bernard Marguerite. I'm a French correspondent in this part of the world for decades, and by the way, also a former Fulbright at Harvard. Last time at the Sorenstein with Marvin Cobb. I appreciate very much your presentation, so much indeed that my only hope now is that you become the next ambassador to France.
We have to talk to my friend Ambassador Rifkin about that.
May I ask you two questions? One as an academic, the second one can fare the worst as a journalist. As an academic, I remember, and we all remember, the project of the new American century in the late 90s by Wolfowitz and Cheney, and it became the manifestos of the Bush era. And then it was said that America has the strength to carry wars all around the world simultaneously, and even preventive wars. There is no limit. Now we have seen that the cost of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan is in trillions of dollars, and until recently costed more than $5 billion a month, both in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it seems that even America, with all its strengths, cannot afford to do it. The cost at home has been tremendous. And now my question, America must be the leader, democratic leader of the world once again. But it has to be present in the world. But as you said, America has first to be strong at home. And obviously it's not feasible to do both. So what is the most important, and how can America become the example of democracy if it is not strong at home? I don't have the answer, maybe you do. And my second question is, billions of people have been overjoyed when Mr. Obama became president. We all had great expectations and hopes. And honestly, we have been slightly disappointed. It seems that the policy of Mr. Obama so far in his 3 years have been a mixture of post-Bushism with truly policies of Mr. Obama. can we hope that if elected, and we hope that Mr. Obama will be re-elected for a second term, even if the Republicans can try to play a Trump card, this policy this time will be truly a new policy, an Obama policy, and not a mixture of what we had in the past with the new one.
So I won't comment on Democrats versus Republicans, but I will say the following. First, to the first part of your question, the United States has been at war for 10 years. And that's an almost unprecedented situation, and it's been extremely costly, as you say. Whatever one thinks about the justification for those wars, I happen to be somebody who supported them. But be that as it may, it's costly, and the president understands this, and he's been talking about this in all of his foreign policy, including with respect to Iraq and Afghanistan, and the fact that our commitments militarily cannot be indefinite. And also with respect to Libya, where the United States has a role to play and a leadership role to play, but leadership doesn't necessarily mean you do everything by yourself, and our French allies and British are leading this effort with NATO, and that's as it should be. We need to share these burdens together. And with respect to the president's future policies and past policies, I probably wouldn't describe the last 2+ years the way you did. But I guess I would just make a point, and I do understand that I'm saying this in Poland. There tends to be much more continuity in foreign policy than discontinuity between Democrats and Republicans. There may be periods of time at the beginning of administrations where new administrations have particular points of view and they propound them, but as they go on, they tend to represent the interests of the country in a way that can be sustained and supported and endorsed by the American public. And we've really seen that very dramatically throughout the post-Cold War period, and I think we're seeing that with President Obama as well. The first term of President Reagan was very different than the second term of President Reagan. I would say also the first term of President Bush was very different from the second term of President Bush, and I've written about that myself. But I think President Obama is a very pragmatic person. He entered office as a pragmatic person, somebody who could inspire people, as you say, but also somebody who's focused on results. So my verdict, a little bit different from yours. I think he's delivering what he promised, and he's proceeding on a basis of realism, but staying true to his own principles and my country's principles.